All right, next on the docket, more problems in Baltimore. Last month was its deadliest month in more than 30 years. And the reasons? Well, at least to some are pretty shocking if you believe the officers who spoke to CNN. They said it's because they're backing off due to the political climate in their city.
An officer is worried. He's riding down the street, even though you have a reasonable suspicion, and you see, you know, a guy or girl walking down the street, and there's a bulge coming in from their waistband, and there's different characteristics that we are trained for to look for an armed person. And I can tell you this, and it's the truth. 9 out of 10 times that officer is going to keep on driving.
Now, we all know the problems flared up here after the death of Freddie Gray while in police custody. 6 of the officers involved were arrested and are now facing charges. Their lawyers are now calling for prosecutor Marilyn Mosby to recuse herself. They say Mosby directed cops to aggressively patrol the area where Gray was arrested because a lot of drugs were being sold there. They also say the officers are doing what Mosby asked for when they arrested Gray, but now she is prosecuting them, and we know the language that she did. So, John, to that point, go beyond Baltimore. Obviously, a lot of clients are officers. In fact, we dealt with Ed Mullins at the PBA. We've talked to him on a few different instances. The Sergeant's been able to associate, I'm sorry. Is it a different climate now where cops are scared about not just every camera out there, but also how maybe even leadership is going to be there for a certain point, but not if the you-know-what hits the fan?
There's no question. Cops across this country feel under fire. They feel that they are not given the benefit of the doubt anymore. You know, there was a time I went on the police department over 30 years ago, and back then, you know, police work almost always ends up badly for somebody. You know, you asked about what can society expect. Well, there's competing expectations from society. Look, the people that called in that case, some people wanted these kids dispersed. Those kids didn't want to be dispersed. These are competing wants and desires, and the police are going to make somebody unhappy. Now, police work is the only profession I'm aware of where if it ends badly, there's a real good chance somebody's going to try to put you in prison. Now, 30 years ago when I became a policeman, we were given a benefit of the doubt. If it went bad, people took a step back and they said, well, let's give the cop a benefit of the doubt. Maybe he acted properly. Let's see the whole tape. Let's see all 8 minutes. Let's let the investigation unfold before we pass judgment on a cop. We don't have that anymore. What you saw in Baltimore, you saw an arrest at lightning speed. Now, I don't know about you guys, but when I saw that video, that kid looks like his spine is damaged before he's ever put in that car. Now, somebody in a position of power there, in a position of over these officers' lives, should take a step back and say, how did that end? Did he crash the bike before? We don't know any of this. But he certainly looks like his spine was damaged before he's put in that car.
If you believe those 2 officers who obviously had their identities protected, and let's just take at face value, they're representative of the Baltimore PD, 9 out of 10 times they're looking the other way because they're worried about what's going to happen. Even if the numbers are even remotely close to that, they did sign on to protect and serve, right? I mean, you don't get to pick and choose which crimes you want to prosecute just because maybe Ms. Mosby hung you out to dry here. And I certainly think I'd be upset if I was a Baltimore cop how she handled the situation. That said, you don't get to look the other way, right?
It's not looking the other way. It's self-preservation. You know, back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, we had reactive policing. Police showed up when they were called. There was no proactive policing because there was attacks on police officers. Police officers being assassinated in the street. They felt under fire, so they said, you know what, we'll do what we have to do, but we're not doing anymore. That changed in the 90s. We became much more proactive. We asked cops to go out there and aggressively police, and they did. Now the pendulum is swinging back the other way. Now there's a hue and a cry from all corners to put police officers in prison when things don't go as we want them to go.
I see you twitching.
Well, let's put it this way. Anytime any of our clients are arrested, it's always a speedy arrest. Nobody says, hey, we're going to take a few months and we'll get back to you. You get arrested immediately. And then sometimes they find that you didn't do anything. And then normally they offer you a plea to something like they did the young man who died after spending 3 years in Rikers. So When the grand jury is getting other cases, they get the case right away. You're ready for trial in a couple of months. So this is not an expedited process here. The other thing is this. Police officers sign up, as you said, to prosecute crime. That includes when they see their fellow officers committing crime, even when they're in uniform. And I think that the fact that they haven't done that historically is why we are where we are right now. Now, you also have a host of other reasons why police have slowdowns, and you can look in Westchester County in the tri-state area and find any number.
This one isn't a contract issue. This is something visceral that's happened here.
But sometimes it's more than a contract issue. Sometimes you're upset with the district attorney because she prosecuted one of your fellow officers who pleads guilty to lying.
But
like
isn't it a
in
little bit
Yonkers.
more than this in this particular case, in that she went out and she said, no justice, no peace, well, I give you justice and everything else. And she had given competing directives. Nobody alleges that she said, break somebody's spine. We don't even know what happened, along the line. I'm not going to go into what happened to Freddie Gray because we still don't know. That said, though, some of this is on her, right?
It's on her, and perhaps what's also on her is she needs to mend the fences, stop being so tone deaf, go out and deal with the officers that go out there and work for her. But it really is no excuse to go and have the pendulum swing so far the other way where they're just getting back at her, because it's all about her and now it's all about them, and of course who gets left? The people that are supposed to be protected. You can't be scared. You have to go out there, you have to do your job, and you can't decide you're not going to do your job because this district attorney may have slighted you. We had the same problem with de Blasio, who also issued those statements, and we also had that problem in New York City. There has to be a way to mend those fences so that the people do get protected.
John, before we're running out of time on this one, I've heard from people, sober-minded people, that aren't on either edge of this one, who say, when you look at some of the cops who did some of this stuff, like the cop in South Carolina, like the cop who shot Tamir Rice, that 13-year-old in Cleveland, and you look at their jackets, you say, wait a second, what was this guy doing with a badge, let alone a gun, right? Is part of the problem that for so long, the good cops, the overwhelming majority of good cops, have either looked the other way or the so-called blue wall, that they let the guy stay on the job when he didn't belong on the job, and then he dragged down the whole department as a consequence?
I mean, I'm sure in
Use your own
isolated
experience.
cases.
There had to be, just like in every faculty lounge in every school in America, there's one teacher that's saying, this guy's mailing it in. He doesn't belong in front of a classroom, let alone something else. There's in every walk of life, but the difference is this guy's carrying a gun and a badge.
I think, though, in most of those cases, as in any of the ones you pointed out, it's an opinion, it's a belief, but there's no, you don't have anything you can point to and say, turn this guy in for this or that, because you didn't, you may have heard rumor or innuendo that he was a bad cop, but you didn't witness it yourself. So, I think there's a lot of myth to the blue wall. We see cases of cops testifying against other cops all the time, and I don't think what you're seeing now is cops feeling slighted. They're afraid of being indicted. Well, they're afraid if they make a mistake, society's not going to have their back. And I'll shut up in a second. But to Mayo's point, we can't treat the police as some separate entity. They're us. The police are our representatives. They're society's
John,
representatives.
that's what I was trying to get to. I think at one end we want them to be supermen, okay? But on the other end, there's the argument that there is no culpability because the job is so hard. And, I mean, you want to talk about a perfect case, and we're out of time, unfortunately, on this. Look what happened in that Brooklyn stairwell, right? Nobody meant to go kill somebody when they went in that stairwell. But at the same end, some guy died just because he opened up a door. And if I could pick one single example, I'm sure it was a good kid, obviously, that officer in that stairwell, I'm sure he didn't mean anything, right? However, somebody's dead. So what is the appropriate punishment? And it's going to take a smarter person than me to figure that one out. But if you want to crystallize, I think right there is a challenge we are. John, don't be a stranger. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Coming up next, we got 3 legal stories. I'm going to bounce around for these 3 guys, including a Penn State student and frat members now suing the school and the frat. He said he was a whistleblower. The school says not so much. Then we'll go down to Tennessee, where Vanderbilt players, football players, convicted of rape. But now the question is not what happened to them, but should the evidence of the case be public, even if the victim says not so much? That and more after this.